In Washington, D.C.'s historically black U Street district, you can find this statue, dedicated to the 209,000 members of the United States Colored Troops regiments who fought on the side of the Union in the Civil War. And the first training ground for these black soldiers was here, known today as Theodore Roosevelt Island. Yet no mention of it can be found on the island.
Yeah, there's not one marker. They did have a small picture of the first colored infantry, but no markers, no historical signs or nothing, no statues, no monument to honor them.
So what is their story? And why did their contributions remain unacknowledged on the island they trained at? Well, for starters, during the onset of the Civil War, the island was called Mason's Island, in honor of founding father George Mason, who was once its previous owner. Because of its proximity to the US capital and the Confederate state of Virginia, the island became strategically significant and so was occupied by the US military at the Civil War's start in 1841. The story of the 1st Colored Infantry Regiment and its connection to the island began on New Year's Day in 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
The Emancipation Proclamation applied to all 10 states in rebellion. Those 10 states had been taken in by military conquest. And so the proclamation went wherever the soldiers went. So whatever the soldiers fighting in the South, any plantation along the area, these people are self-emancipated, and they will enlist able-bodied men between the ages 17 up to 45.
This allowed the creation of various military units across Washington, D.C., which had become a hub of former slaves. Unfortunately, many of these black military units faced constant and often violent abuse by some of D.C.'s white residents, many of whom held secret sympathies for the Confederacy. To protect these black soldiers from abuse, they were secretly moved to Mason's Island, where they formed the 1st United States Colored Infantry Regiment and were trained to serve the Union. Although the exact percentage is unknown, a vast majority of these soldiers were former slaves themselves and saw their participation in the fight against the Confederate South as a battle against a system that, from their perspective, was fighting to keep them enslaved.
This is a rebellion of rebellion. The idea was fight against the Pharaoh, which they known as the slave master. So they knew if they entered this war and they would win the war, that grants everybody's freedom. President Lincoln himself rode the horse all around downtown the district. He was also in the outskirts looking for the 1st Regiment, but then somebody let them know that they had Mason's Island.
So why isn't their story recognized on the island today? One reason is that the island is now dedicated to President Theodore Roosevelt, a vocal proponent of nature preservations, requiring the island to present a kind of natural, untouched aesthetic to honor the former president. Still, the story of the 1st Colored Infantry Regiment is one that should see greater acknowledgement on the island, and one which those like Marquez wish to see more recognition of today.